your feed on all social media and just about any website that you go on is probably filled with people talking about this COVID-19 pandemic. And that is because it is a public health crisis. And we need to talk about it. People are talking about it all the time because they need to. This is important. This is not something to sweep under the rug. And that is something important to realize, that this is a public health crisis that is exasperated by a lot of the problems in, politics worldwide. Especially here where I live in America, and in my area in particular, is starting to spread a little more, which obviously causes me a little bit of anxiety about me going out. But, of course, I still have to work and I still have to do what I gotta do, so I'm just trying to get by day to day, sanitizing, washing my hands, and all of that. We're all doing the five here. Social isolation, which really doesn't mean much for me, as somebody who spends most of his time, at home, playing games or browsing the web, listening to people yell about politics in podcasts or what have you, which has all been bunched up by this COVID-19 pandemic. So we just need to talk about how a lot of the ways that authorities have been handling this has been underwhelming and has been inadequate. And it just shows how much they care, how little they care about the people. Because the facts are that they waited until the last minute to really be doing anything about it, especially in my country, where they decided to, fire the pandemic response team 2 years ago, and then now they have to hire them all back and try to, add more money to public health to try and address this crisis when they should have been funding it, years ago. Every single budget should have been adding increases to that, because public health is a very important issue. I'm also a history nerd, and I've noticed that within the history nerd community on the internet, a lot of people are going back to the 1918 influenza pandemic, the Spanish flu as it was colloquially known, and I noticed that all throughout human history, disease has always been an issue. When we talk about history, we almost never really talk much about disease besides the Black Death and smallpox, but really, disease has been the great killer of mankind, almost like the unseen threat that has always been following us. And I want to implore you that disease is something that's very important for us to watch for. Let me put it this way. There is an enormous chance that you will probably die of some kind of a disease. It's almost guaranteed. And public health is a very big issue when it comes to things like diseases spreading, when it comes to the potential of pandemics, because it's not a matter of if a pandemic happens, but a matter of when. Because we live on planet Earth with a lot of microbes, and some of them are just not nice. And that's just a fact. And there's illnesses spreading every day, and every once in a while, these illnesses are incredibly contagious and dangerous. And that is the COVID-19 pandemic in a nutshell. If we were better prepared for it, less people would be dying, less people would be suffering. So right now, we need our politicians to be acting right now. One thing I want you to think about is how your leaders are behaving in times of crisis like this one. Donald Trump is finally acting on it after dragging his feet about it and not really knowing what to do. The larger U.S. government is too busy arguing with each other on exactly what plans they want, because they want their party's idea of a stimulus package. Meanwhile, people are dying and they don't know exactly how much money to throw at certain things, and the stock market is suffering. The economy is suffering because a lot of people can't work and can't go out shopping, and they just threw trillions of dollars at the stock market that literally just vanished. And meanwhile, Bernie Sanders, the man, the myth, the legend, Bernie Sanders, is currently working his hardest to try and address this crisis, holding roundtable discussions, speaking with people, and many journalists kind of pestering him about his campaign. He seems largely unconcerned with that because he's diverted his attention to this COVID-19 pandemic, which just shows, again, how much he really cares about the people. But, keep convincing yourself that Joe Biden cares about the people, in this public health crisis where he hasn't been seen in over a week now. It's become a meme where everyone's going, "Where's Joe Biden?" And people tried to pull the "Where's Bernie" thing, but it was like, hey, guess what he's doing? working as hard as to try and deal with this. And it turns out this is really, really hard when you have a system that works for profit instead of people, when you have a system that works against the people. This COVID-19 pandemic is exasperated by the issues of late-stage capitalism. So we all need to band together at this time and really keep this in our memory. This is my encouragement to you. 9/11 was a big event that stood in the country's memory and in world history's memory that reminded Americans that our country is not an impenetrable fortress, and we do have threats externally that do target us. Because of that, there's been a lot of growth in our military and defense budget and whatnot. But we are forgetting about, the threat internally, of internal threats targeting us that are invisible, that are not nations targeting us, but are small microbial creatures and various other threats of existing in a planet full of these creatures that target us as well. We need this COVID-19 pandemic to be a public health version of 9/11, where we chant to ourselves, never forget. Never forget the way that they handled this. Never forget how the Chinese government wanted to cover it up when it was in its earlier stages. Never forget how the American government is dragging its feet trying to address this. Never forget how various businesses, such as GameStop, held their workers, staying there in order to increase profits during a time of public health crises. Never forget all of the businesses that refused to close in spite of being told to by the authorities. Never forget about how many people are dying right now. But I am not trying to stress you out. I'm trying to make you aware of your place in the world, and that if you can remember this, you can hold this over their heads and in turn give yourself bargaining power to make a difference, because you hold in your memory a time when they were inadequate, and they won't be able to say anything about it because they know that they weren't. This will show you just how inadequate they are and why we need change. Let this motivate you that we need change. This is what many people on the Bernie Sanders camp are talking about when we say that these issues are life or death, that we need to change the system because the alternative is people dying in pandemics, dying in public health crises, because the elites don't take seriously the health of the people. It's up to us to make a change. So that's it. This is a serious time, and I don't want you to stress, but you have to do the 5. We all got to do our time, got to do social isolation. It's much better for me, at home with my own stuff and whatnot, than it is for people who are more extroverted and are always going out and aren't exactly gamers and whatnot. But hey, we're going to get through this. But it's important to think about what we will be like on the other side of it. Whenever there's an issue, whenever there's a catastrophe, a crisis in your life, or larger at whole, the issue is not whether or not you get through it, but what will you be like on the other side? And that is what we need to concern ourselves with. What will you be like on the other side of the COVID-19 pandemic? So thank you for watching. Subscribe to the Awaken Revolution. I'll catch you later. Peace.